Explore the harmony of health and holiness through a Catholic lens. Discover how faith rooted in tradition fosters vibrant living. This podcast rebroadcasts the weekly Becoming Gift segment on Morning Offering on Ave Maria Radio. You can check out the Physically Spiritual podcast from Awakened Catholic for my long-form discussions and presentations, or you can find my Substack at becominggift.com. This is your host, Andrew Reinhardt.
Today I want to talk about the Triduum. We're about these 3 days, the Triduum, the 3 days of really re-celebrating, going back through, experiencing once again Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. These liturgies we have in the next few days are sort of buffet for the senses. It's an invitation for our body to enter into the Paschal mystery. So in these 3 days, on Thursday, we'll have the Mass of the Lord's Supper. On that day, we have the celebrant of the liturgy washing feet. We have, of course, the remembrance of the first Eucharist, and we have the special opportunity for prayer after the Mass. On Good Friday, we have the Liturgy of the Lord's Passion with the reverencing of the cross, the reception of the Eucharist consecrated the night before, the reading of the Passion. And on Easter, the beautiful Easter Vigil liturgy. If you can make it there, of course, do see the people joining into the church with the Easter fire and the Easter candle and the beautiful liturgy, or the Easter morning liturgy, which is beautiful in its own right, or both. We have this buffet for our senses in these liturgies, all these different symbols that invite us into experiencing something deeper. I like to think of the liturgy as a concert, an analogy for the liturgy, because concerts always have opening acts. Yeah. And I think one of the things the opening acts do is they enable us to enter into the space where we are, that we are no longer angry about how expensive parking was or the traffic or the argument we had with our spouse in the way or worrying about the babysitter. But we sort of act out in repetition what's going to happen when the main event comes on the stage. And that's sort of what happens in the liturgy. There's a bunch of kind of little ways we receive Jesus in and through the different symbols and the scripture and the person of the priest and the church gathered, et cetera, in order to then receive Jesus sacramentally in the Most Holy Eucharist. We're being engaged fully bodily. But how do we receive and enter into the liturgy with authenticity? How do we remain vulnerable to the liturgical actions and still worship authentically? I don't know about you, but I often go to Mass and I wonder, what the heck happened? I can't even remember the homily, much less have my heart moved.
Right.
So
You've got a couple of children in tow most of the time. So, yeah.
I want to offer a few reflections from Dietrich von Hildebrand in his book, Liturgy and Personality, to help us enter into the liturgy. In this book, he introduces this idea of value. He says, it's that which is created exists in order to imitate and glorify God by fulfilling the divine idea in its regard and simultaneously bringing to fruition the fullness to which it is ordained. For all values are rays which radiate from God's being, who is all holiness. This idea that the things of the world are giving themselves to us, are being what they are and radiating something. There's something objective that the thing is giving to us that we are called to be moved by, receive, to be vulnerable to. He talks about the person with personality. He says, the truly normal is the classical man who is fully perceptive to values and responsive to them, the uncramped, objective man, liberated from the prison of himself, in which the capacity for self-donation and love is unbroken. So there's this idea that we need to receive what the things are giving to us, to have this vulnerability to what's happening, this letting it be what it is and having reverence toward it, having this fundamental attitude to let the things unfold as they are in their specific nature, not trying to reach out and be the master of them, not trying to be the judge of them, but also not having a kind of, he says, familiar conviviality and an irreverence toward them. So this is what he says about the egocentric person. He says, somehow the egocentric man transforms his giving himself up to value into a means of his own perfection. He's not interested in this perfection because of the glorification of God, but because of his own perfection, what he gets out of it. So the idea is like, I'm at Mass so I can get holy. This is like my Catholic self-help here. I'm not here to worship God in spirit and truth. This is what he says, is the man who has been melted by the sun of values above all, the man who has been wounded by the love of Christ is also open to every man and has entered into the objective unity of all. So he uses this idea of value as a way of understanding the liturgy, that it's both a place where we sort of can let go of our rigoristic demand for everything to be perfect and just the way we think it ought to be and just so rigid, but on the other hand, that we're not irreverent and that we don't enter into it shallowly and just think it doesn't matter. That we need to have this posture of receptivity, of giving ourselves to the values that are presented to us. And so I want to propose 4 ways of preventing ourselves from being closed off to what these Triduum liturgies are offering to us. First is try to avoid a sort of isolated way of entering into the liturgy. It's as if the liturgy was just the background music to our private prayer.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting there, eyes closed, head down, hands folded, maybe not singing, not engaging, not doing the responses, not engaging with the sign of peace. There's sort of this closed off private prayer happening, and we're invited to a different kind of participation. But we can also have a rigoristic and judgmental participation in the liturgy. We sit there and think about the way it ought to be, thinking about the way our priest ought to hold his hands when he is in Orion's position, the way, that the parish servers ought to behave, the way that, et cetera, et cetera. We sit there as the judge of the liturgy, not receiving from it, not vulnerable to it. But we also have to avoid, number 3, a showy and irreverent participation with excessive and emotional hand gestures that are distracting the people around us, making this kind of a shallow way to go through the motions, making it more of a play act. But then we also have to avoid what von Hildebrand was talking about, a kind of self-improvement or therapeutic way of entering into the liturgy. I'm here to get something out of it. Even if it's holiness, that's still a selfish act. Liturgy isn't a means to an end.
That one takes a minute to get your mind around. I mean, that there's kind of of course we want to be holy, but we want that for the right reason, right?
Yeah, liturgy isn't a means to an end. It's an end in itself. And it's in worshiping God authentically that, we're transformed, but it's a secondary result of it. It's a consequence of it. So we go in with a heart pure, the intention to give ourselves to God. And as a result of that, we're transformed. But the more we're there to try to get something out of it, the more we close ourselves off to that transformation. Because we're not authentically, wholeheartedly entering into it with our whole self, our whole being vulnerable to what's being given to us. So I want to invite everyone to get to whatever liturgy of the Triduum they can get to. Try to stretch yourself a little bit liturgically if you don't normally make it to days that aren't holy days of obligation. But as you're there, try to let yourself be vulnerable to the liturgies. Try to really perceive what's there, what's happening. How are we being invited into the life of Christ through these liturgical actions? Let yourself be vulnerable, be moved. Right? Don't be the judge of the liturgy. Don't be so closed off and focused on yourself that you can't get what's there. Don't make it all about you. Try to be truly vulnerable to Christ in the Triduum this year.
I love it, Andrew. And it is all about this idea of really giving ourselves over to the Lord, right? And being present with him. I mean, I find myself in liturgy so many times in Mass, whether I'm participating with a group in evening prayer or morning prayer, always kind of with your mind wondering about what's going on around you. Exactly to your point. Why is it the priest doing this? Why is it the choir singing that? It's so easy to fall into and forget that you're there just to be in communion with God.
Yep. And as you're going through that process of judging the liturgy, what's happening is you're being gypped.
Yeah,
because you're closing yourself off to the person of Christ who's there, wanting to be with you, wanting to give you himself so that you could give your whole self back to him.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Gift. You can catch the show live every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern on Ave Maria Radio. You can also find my long-form podcasts, discussions, and presentations on the Physically Spiritual podcast. Subscribe to my Substack at becominggift.com to find more from me, and don't forget to like and subscribe.